Storytelling is a very powerful and unique skill. It's not something everyone knows how to do, effectively at least, but if you can learn to tell your own story, relate to other people, then guess what? You have an advantage in your personal brand and in your life that many other people don't have. So today, I'm going to give you my 5 best tips for better storytelling so that you can tell people who you are and why it matters. Let's get into it. Hey everybody, this is Roberto Blake helping you create something awesome today. Welcome back to the channel. Today what I want to talk about is storytelling, and I want to give you 5 of my best tips for telling a better story, communicating your value, and helping people get context on you, because context matters. So tip number 1 is called framing. You've heard the phrase, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. So ultimately, framing is about the how we present something to someone. Now, if I approached you, I told you that I'm gonna give you constructive criticism or I'm gonna give you unsolicited advice, your immediate reaction instinctively might be to be very defensive, very skeptical, and you're gonna close yourself off from me. But if I frame that same information that I'm about to convey to you very differently in terms of how I lead, well, that's gonna go over different and you're gonna be more open and you're gonna be more receptive to it. I'll give you a quick example. Instead of saying, I'm gonna give you constructive criticism, or, well, here's my unsolicited opinion. If I started the conversation and said, wow, I've been in a really difficult situation like that before. There's some advice that I wish someone had given me when I was struggling with the same thing that you're going through now, because I think it made a real difference for me. You see, I could give exactly the same information, but just the lead up to it, of demonstrating that I'm empathetic and that where this information, where this experience is coming from, where this thing that I want, this unsolicited advice is coming from, is from a place of compassion. It's a different frame than saying, I'm just gonna give you my opinion. I'm showing that I care about you and that I'm acting in good faith. You see, your conversation frame makes a huge difference in how people perceive what you're going to say, even if you're saying exactly the same thing. The setup, the frame can shift everything. Tip number 2 for better storytelling. Read the room. Know your audience. Now, whether you're doing this in the actual real world or you're doing it through content creation, it can make a difference. When I'm speaking at an event, I usually ask the event coordinator about who the general audience is. And I also, walk around the event, I talk to people, I get a sense and an understanding of the place that I'm in, what the culture is, and how people are going to react to things. And I test things out with them. Now, the good news about doing something like YouTube is I have analytics and I have data. I know that over 70% of this audience is, between the ages of 24 and 44. I know that I'm not speaking to the majority of young people under 18. So I don't make my content with a lot of super jump cuts and a lot of memes and all these things that I know plays well to that audience. I make my content in a way that's more suitable to a more mature audience. And I feel that that's important. I also try to make content that doesn't rely on the visuals as much, because I know that a lot of you who are adults, you're listening to me while you're at work, or you are finding a way to consume this in the car, listening to it and not watching, no distracted driving, and things of that nature, or while you're doing your work around the house or your workout or you're with your kids. So since I know that my audience skews a lot older, and that those of you who are out of that 24 to 44 are more mature even than that, and that's the majority of the audience. Less than 6% of the audience is under 18. Since I know that, I style the content and the presentation with the audience in mind. Tip number 3 comes down to something that sounds simple until you actually have to do it, and that's be authentic. And that goes partly with number 2 in reading the room, because understanding what other people want versus what you want and who you are is a balancing act. I don't think that anybody, especially in social media, I don't think most people intend to be fake or to be perceived as fake or to pander. But I also think that when you feel obliged or obligated towards your audience or responsible towards your audience, you try to do things for them even when it makes you uncomfortable or it's not what you would want. And to a certain extent, if you're doing things with a mentality of being of service to people or being accommodating, that's not wrong, and it's not truly fake. It feels that way to people, and they take it very much to heart, I would say. But being authentic is down to self-awareness. I don't think a lot of people know how to be authentic or be their truly authentic self. And I don't think they're being fake. I think they're trying to be accommodating. I think they're trying to solicit a reaction and positive feedback from people because, frankly, we're taught to get along with people. We're taught to be people pleasers. We're taught to do these things, and we're rewarded for it, and we're validated for it. So I'm less being accusing, and I need to make a video specifically about this, about maybe it's called the problem with being authentic, or like why everyone feels fake. Maybe that's it. I'll figure out some clickbaity title. But see, even in that, I have to come up with a title that is interesting to you, whether it's a title that I'm comfortable with, or the trade-off is I just won't get views. And often that's exactly what I do. You have to find the appropriate balance between how to best serve your audience and not feel like you're in conflict with your values or what you care about in terms of expression. This is not a one-size-fits-all thing. This is going to be tailored to you, your personality, and what you're willing to accept. There are people who create a persona online, and it is clear and obvious that it is a persona, and that gives them some emotional distance from this particular issue because it's purely for entertainment value. It still creates other problems in terms of context and how headlines are written about them, but that's a topic for another video. Tip number 4 for being a better storyteller actually loops back to something we talked about earlier. Formats. Having a format for how you present based on the audience. Based on the audience and moving from one group or one room to another, you can shift and change the format and the way that you present as a storyteller or the way that you make content. So if I were speaking to a younger audience and a younger demographic, I know that I have to deal possibly with shorter attention spans and that I am competing for attention. So I would try to make cultural references that make sense for that group and tell stories that are relatable to them. If I'm dealing with a different group, that will shift. And so I have to be prepared and know, well, what analogies can I use for group A versus group B? What formats, if I'm making content in terms of editing, work for this group versus that group? And also, how do I, in terms of my presentation and packaging, make it visibly clear when something is specific to this audience versus this audience? What can I do there? So I really think you have to pay attention to the context of who an audience is and who you're telling a story for, and then you have to package your format accordingly. If I were going to do a book cover for a group of young adults, I might go with certain colors and certain themes, certain font faces, and while still staying on brand, I might do that very differently for a more mature audience. And so that's just something that I really want more of you to think about. And I think it goes down to the branding aspects of things in terms of presentation, not just in terms of purely visual branding, but developing a style. And finally, tip number 5 when it comes to better storytelling is tell stories you know. Tell stories you know. I try very much to stay in my own lane. The things that I talk about are things that I have experience with. Building a personal brand online, building an online business, growing a YouTube channel, growing on Instagram, growing on Twitter, growing on LinkedIn. These are things I did, so I talk about them. And ultimately, the stories we know the most are the stories about ourselves. And again, it sounds egotistical or pretentious to talk about yourself, or, oh, here's what I did, or here's how I did it. Who are you? But ultimately, the thing is, that's surface level if people are thinking that. They just have to judge you based on your execution at the end of the day. And so don't be afraid to tell your own story. Don't be afraid to talk about the things that you know and the things that you're passionate about. Look, if I wasn't going to talk about like what I did in my career and what I find meaningful and what I found helpful for me, then I would talk about Star Wars because I'm a big Star Wars nerd and I know probably more about it than most of the other nerds out there, and I know all this obscure lore, right? Or I could talk about, these different books and the lessons I read from other people, or talk about people that I admire. I could talk about other people, but ultimately, I don't know those stories and those things nearly as well as I know my own life experiences. And so while there might be more popularity or entertainment value, or that might feel less narcissistic or to people who want to judge that sort of thing, the thing is, ultimately, the story you know the best are the ones about you and the ones that you lived. You lived it, you experienced it, it's your truth. So it's ultimately the best story that you have. And at some point, you should really consider telling it because, you know what? It deserves to be heard. You're a unique individual who's here for a finite amount of time in the world. Your story is one of the things you're going to get to leave behind. And it's the thing that nobody else can really compete with at the end of the day because it's yours. You have absolute ownership of it. Nobody else can take that from you. So I know that's a little deep, something to think about. So I've got a question of the day for you. What is your biggest challenge in developing your personal brand? I would love to hear from you in the comment section of this video. And if you found this helpful, please share it with other people so that they can learn how to be a better storyteller. Like this video if you like it. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification bell, check out the other awesome content on the channel. In fact, check out my secrets of personal branding video if you want more stuff like this. As always, you guys, thanks so very much for watching, and don't forget, go out there and create something awesome today. Take care.